Hello there and welcome to this vlog of March 2025, and in today's video I am going to discuss BattleTech Gothic. Two words I never thought I'd really put together, but there we are. Um, this came out of left field, for sure. Certainly not something I was expecting. It's been, dare I say, quite divisive in the community, and I will, at the latter part of this video, give my opinion on it, but I've got some things to go through before we get into my opinion. Um, and yeah, very interesting. I'll be honest with you, I completely like decided not to do a video on it until April, early April, because I was convinced it was an April Fool's joke. However, having researched it a little bit this morning and spoken to a few people in the community, absolutely seems like it is real. What I thought, because obviously there's a lot of detail on this, right? They've got like sheets and mechs and everything else. What I kind of had it in my head that they'd done is this was like the Solaris pack, and they just packaged it up as like an April Fool's joke, and then like next week they'll be like, we got you. This is Solaris. But it doesn't look like that's a thing now. This is a real product that they're going in the direction of. It looks like it's a parallel universe to BattleTech. So it's got like the same mechs, everything else, but you can see just from the artwork there, it's got like a real like Lovecraftian, grimdarky type feel to it. There's lots of like gribbly bits on the mechs, like, I presume like hooks and chains and skulls and things like that. So it's very much like inspired by some, not just Warhammer 40,000, but like it's got like a Lovecraftian feel to it. There is, traditionally there has been a bit of a Lovecraftian thing to BattleTech. You've got things like the Black Marauder, which is a little bit Lovecraftian, like a nameless fear, that kind of thing. So it's not something that they haven't done before at some level, but they've never gone like full in like this. And again, I'm going to keep my opinion to the end of this because I just want to have a discussion about what it is and what we've got here. So, and we can do some of the positive side of it as well, because you can see there from the mechs, if you're a BattleTech fan, you'll recognise most of these mechs anyway. So we have got a Marauder, a Rifleman, an Irby, a Scorpion, it's the quad mech here. We've got a Phoenix Hawk, an Atlas, a King Crab, and I think that's a Firestarter. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it will be a light mech, given that they've got like two heavies, two mediums, two assaults. So, and a Firestarter would work thematically for this, right? Like burn the evil massive kaiju monster thing or whatever, or the gribbly flying thing. So I'm pretty, it looks a bit like a Firestarter anyway, but I can't be sure. Anyway, on the miniatures themselves, I think Catalyst have got a great record at this, and these are, it's an interesting line. It's something that whether you wanted to play within the universe they've set up here or use these in like a Solaris Force or a Pirate Force, you could absolutely do that. So there is a lot of crossover. That's important to say as well, because I think this will still get sales from people who've just got no interest in it or are maybe a little bit apprehensive about it. Like, I think I'm, no spoilers yet, but I'm quite worried by this at some level. So, but I'd still probably get it just because the mechs look cool and interesting and would be fun to paint. So there is that from a commercial standpoint. Yeah, so there we are. Let's go into some things that the community have been saying though. So this morning, I went and just posted a very early this morning UK time, just said BattleTech Gothic thoughts, and I had a fair few responses here, so I'm going to go through a few of these. The community that I've kind of built up here as well is generally the much more sensible part of the community. So these are all actually very good takes. Some are a bit more emotive than others, but generally speaking, I think this is a lot of common sense is spoken here. So I'm just going to read these out to you. So the first is James Simmons, who says, I like 40k and I like BattleTech, but I don't want them mashed together. BattleTech Gothic is a hard pass from me. I think a lot of people will feel that way as well, James, so you won't be alone there, I don't think. We've then got Dan XP, who I speak to quite a bit in the comment section. He then writes, a week-long April Fool's joke, question mark. It might also be a teaser to gauge reaction. To me, I am indifferent and will remain so until I see more. They are maybe done with the original universe because every time they advance the storyline, people lose their mind anyway, so branching off, then if it goes boobs up, they can cut it off. That's a really interesting point, and I think this ties into my concern over what they're doing here in terms of being slightly worried about it, in terms of what they are doing with the original universe, if you want to call it that at this juncture. Next up then we got Darren Wheeler, and Darren says, I'm still on the April Fool's side a bit too, not bothered by it as it's not my vibe. Some people seem keen for it though, which is interesting. We've then got, what's this? Hadrakodos, who says, my favourite theory is that the game system will work and canonically that it will be considered a famous Solaris made-up horror movie universe when your fantasy universe has an inbuilt fantasy universe. Smiley face. What he is referring to there, I presume it's he, is very famously in BattleTech, when the cartoon came out in the early 90s, it was so like random and like basically destroyed a lot of the lore that came before it with the clan invasion, that when the question was asked, what is this, they basically said, oh, it's just this is, you know, FASA at the time said, oh, it's just in-universe propaganda created by Fedcom for kids. And that is brilliant, right? Because then you can still enjoy it and you can appreciate it, but it puts a whole new spin on it. You don't have to trash it, you don't have to retcon it. It incorporates it into like he said here, when your fantasy universe has an inbuilt fantasy universe. We've then got Very Silent Mouse, friend of the channel for sure, who says, I think it's real. They've been hinting at it in interviews for the last couple of years. In hindsight, I'm interested enough to get the box for the mechs. So yeah, I'd fall on that side, certainly for the mech side of it. Interesting that he thinks that this has been hinted at before as well. I don't really watch anything in terms of the official BattleTech stuff, so I'll take Very Silent Mouse's word for that. We've then got Hatchie of the Hatchie giveaway, designer fame Hatchie. Another designer and I were discussing it. We wanted it to go further. Full mechanical body horror on a kaiju scale. Separate it from both titles while offering up some neat possibilities for designing miniatures. And as always, Hatchie's got a very good take and always takes it usually from like the design style standpoint, because Hatchie is an artist. And I think that's really interesting. I think I would have been far more comfortable with that if it was like separated out. Again, when Hatchie says that there, she's referring to both titles being BattleTech, the original BattleTech IP. I resent having to call it that. So BattleTech and 40k. So just do something like standalone with big kaijus. I think, you know, they've got the skill base to do that, right? I don't know why this feels like a bit of a cop out. As much as I like the miniatures because it's BattleTech and that will probably get me to buy it. Because I recognise them, I do think it's a bit of a cheap way to do it. Like, you know, there's nothing really new there. You're just kind of aping off two IPs. So it'd be really interesting to see what like a proper designer would come up with if they were just told, like, create as a Gothic type BattleTech game, grimdark with kaijus, and maybe, you know, have it inspired by BattleTech, but not so on the nose as this. That'd be my kind of take, and maybe Hatchie's saying that, maybe she is, and I'm just kind of reading between the lines a little bit there. We've then got Mr. Classicar, who says, if it's real, I'm in. I don't feel like this threatens my regular BT or BattleTech hobby in any way, and I like the alternative sculpts. Also, I love the idea of the Atlas customization. Wouldn't mind seeing more of that in mainline BattleTech. In regards to the Atlas, what he's referring to there, the Atlas here, it's got like a customizable head that I think you can change depending on what faction you are playing. And yes, that would be awesome in BattleTech general, because if you had, say, like a Korean mech that you wanted to give like a Japanese feel to, and you put like one of the, like, the, you know, the Japanese actor masks on there or something, that would be super cool. Or you can just have like the standard head or whatever. And then next up, I think this is the take that I appreciate the most. Although I will take one word out of this because this is from Liberal Application of Thud, who says hate. I'm not going to use anything that dramatic in here, but so these are his words. But I think the take I 100% agree with. To each their own, but I hate it. If I wanted Grimdark, I would play GW. That is why it exists. The biggest thing that annoys me, though, is that if we could have got minis that we do not have in plastic yet, instead of Warhammer-fied versions of mechs we already have, if you want your stuff to look like that, hit up the bits box for Gribblies. That's such a good point. Like, you know, I look at like the collection that I've got now, and I'm still desperate to get things like the Menchen, the Lao Hu, the Sai Sang, you know, mechs that like they don't seem like they've got a product line for, and yet here we are getting 8 mechs that, you know, I mean, how many variants of the Urbi do we now have? Right, we had like a box of Urbies, we had a company of Urbies, we get Urbies in singular box sets, we've got Gothic Urbi. We don't need any more Urbies, and if you want a Gothic Urbi, you can just attach some skulls to it and call it a Gothic Urbi. I'd much prefer a new plastic Lao Hu. Thank you very much. So I absolutely think that take is correct, but I can't say I hate this. I just think it's concerning. But again, we'll get into that separately. Before I do that, though, before I give my opinion, what I also wanted to go through here is I wanted to show you. This is I've been threatening to do this for a while, right? So this is my little round table thing, and I've got my camera on my phone camera is on a like a little tripod thing, so it's stable. And I've just recorded 4 mechs that I've got where I've done like a Gothic feel to it. And why, like, again, I feel like this is a bit of a waste of time because, for me anyway, because I've already done this. I do this quite a lot. You know, there are certain forces where it does lend itself very well for a bit of horror. The one that you can see here, and I'm just going to let this play, this is from McCarran's Armoured Infantry. You can just see the decal there on the shoulder, but it's not great because it's like a dark shoulder pad there against the icon, but there is a decal on there. But you can see like big alien head, like the head of a kaiju that they've just like strapped on the thing, plus then chains, gold chains. So it is quite metal. And if we just play this, yeah, like I'm happy with that. It's one of the mechs that I did that got a bit of traction across like across the community. So I think someone like posted it on Reddit or something like that, and it does look quite cool. If you're interested, Games Workshop have like a skull like box pack you can get, and that big head is just part of a big alien skull that you find in that pack. So it's really it's like the easiest thing that I've done there. It didn't take me long at all to proxy. Next up then I've got a mech from the Tortuga Dominion. So this is a Banshee, and I've got like a skull on a chain, and there's also like a red-headed I don't know, some kind of big kaiju monster, or maybe it's just something metal that they've put on there, whatever. Next up, one of my favourite miniatures that I've painted, actually. This is an Executioner from the Dusk Haunters for their Solaris company. And I've like proxied on a Power Claw. I've just like filled it full of like barbed wire and chains and skulls. Got some very cool like nose art. Oh, I'm getting some interference. Let me just go back. Just want to show that nose art because I do love my nose art. Like 50s ladies doing household chores. It's usually like the way to go because that's like the 1940s nose art they used to put on planes. And it suits this because it kind of softens it a little bit. It makes that very hard feel a bit more derpy and fun, and it's Solaris, and that's how it should be. I've then put like open ammo on the side, which is ridiculous. And that's either, I think on this mech it's an LB-10X, but it could also be like a Gauss rifle or something like that. Very dangerous to do that, but it's Solaris and it looks cool. So, rule of cool. One thing I'd say, if you are painting mechs, just as a side note here, very good effect if you want a nice, cheap, easy, quick way to paint mechs. If you use a metallic paint and then you use a dirty wash, I think this one's probably Null Oil from Citadel Miniatures, you can see like it makes the metal pop beautifully and it makes it just look filthy. And I am the world's most average painter, right? But I still think that looks pretty cool. Like if that was across from you on tabletop, you'd be like, that is pretty metal and pretty rad, right? And then finally, this is my variant of the Black Marauder, which we talked about a little bit previously. And this is just a regular Marauder that I've turned up to 11 with skulls and lots of darkness and bad dry brushing. And I basically put I got you can get these specialist pencils for like rust effects. It's meant for like World War II tanks and stuff like that, where you basically draw in after you've painted everything, you can draw in the rust effects. There's plenty of that going on there. Though I don't know if that, you can kind of see it there a little bit on the side. And I just wanted to show that just as this is something that, I'm not metal, right? I listen to The Shins and Def Cab for Cutie and, music that most people will think is really boring and tedious. So I am not metal. There we go. I've gone big again now. But I still say that there is a place for Gothic like this. This is an Eldonius Rex original, Saint 4G. It's a hunchback in a monk's garment in front of a stained glass window. I don't know if it's part of the stained glass window, probably. It's very Gothic. There is a place for Gothic in BattleTech. And you can see just behind me here, that's another Eldonius Rex. That's like a chivalric code that exists within BattleTech for mech warriors, and again, it's got a Gothic feel to it. There is certainly that aesthetic within BattleTech. It's not something that is necessarily alien or troublesome or anything like that. That then leads me on to my opinion, and why I'm slightly concerned about this. And it would be really interesting to get people's thoughts on it. And at the end of this, if you've stuck with this video thus far, just give me another 10-15 minutes, and I'm going to ask you a question at the end of this. Just in regards to the comment section, because I'm just interested on something. First up though, I'm going to base my criticism around 3 facets. So the first is cynicism. The second is commercial potential failure. And the third is bad optic. So first one, cynicism. And this to me is a slight cash grab by Catalyst, I believe. Why do I think that? Well, if you keep up with modern hobby news, one of the big stories over the last few months has been a game called Trench Crusade. Now, Trench Crusade is I don't really know much about it. It's not really for me, but it's set in an alternative universe where the Crusaders or some kind of middle-aged crusading force opened up a gate to hell. All the demons came through, and Trench Crusade itself is basically the battle between the Crusaders and the demons as they, battle for the planet or whatever, and the Crusaders try to contain it. That did incredibly well. It had some really notable artists attached to it. It made a lot of money. It did amazing as a Kickstarter, and it's a new IP, and that's really difficult to do. And it turned a lot of heads. And I feel like Catalyst have seen that and are ooh, we can potentially get in on that crowd as well. And I'll talk about this in terms of the commerciality of this, of why I think that's a mistake. But first of all, important point to say here is that a lot of the kind of disenfranchised people from 40k, and I'm not talking weird people, I'm talking about people who just don't like the way that Space Marines look anymore. We like Primaris Marines. That's what Trench Crusade was trying to kind of capture. It's okay, so you don't like the direction that Warhammer has taken 40k in. Well, this is an aesthetic you will like, because you will know the artists and you'll probably like the thing. And that, I can absolutely see why that worked. Trying to transplant that, though, onto BattleTech, which is a very, real-world IP. There's a direct correlation between, the world now, or certainly the world in the 80s, and the 1,000-year in the future BattleTech universe. And, I'd say this quite often on this channel. You can imagine living in a place like New Avalon, and living in a city on New Avalon and going for pizza and then a coffee, right? It's not meant to be a fantastical universe. It's meant to be grounded. The factories in it are real world factories, You know, you've got things like GM Motors in there, or GM, General Motors, and you know, it's something where like that's the appeal to it. It is the grimdark element of BattleTech is very. There's not there are war crimes and there are horrors that go on, but there's no like nameless horror type stuff going on there. Like the most alien thing you get in BattleTech are the clans, because they've created their own weird and wonderful culture, which we cannot really relate to, but the inner sphere we absolutely can, and the forces within the inner sphere we can. And I think, like, again, just trying to transplant something like a parallel universe onto BattleTech, I just don't see the point of it. I think like it's not the place for it. Again, I go back to that point. I can understand there'll be cross sell between like people who just want to do normal BattleTech and are buying these for like Solaris forces. And yes, it might draw in some people that are like disenfranchised with 40k, but it's too on the nose. Like that BattleTech deserves more than that. That's how I'm going to put this. Like, it doesn't need something like grafting onto the side of it. It's better than that. It's still to this day. I mean, there was stats just done on this recently. It is now the second biggest selling war game on Earth. Obviously, the first is 40k. They've been doing wonderful stuff with this, and I'm really perplexed why you'd. And this, let's segue into the second part. So we'll talk about the commercial side of it. They've created like a competitor to their own game, and let me just go into that a little bit, because there are some really interesting parallels, I think, with another parallel game that exists in the Warhammer universe, and that's Blood Bowl. Sorry if I'm looking out the window here. There's a really low-lying flying plane, and it's really fun to just watch it go. I think it's a Spitfire, actually. There is an air thing. I should turn the camera around and show you. I will, if it gets closer, I'll show you, but I'll try to concentrate. So, the commercial side of it, back in the 80s, Warhammer Fantasy, right? The actual game Warhammer Fantasy, they parallel universed the game off and created a game called Blood Bowl, which I'm sure many of you know and play. I've got plenty of it back there. This is all Blood Bowl up here. And I love Blood Bowl. And it's basically set in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, but it's like a bit of a parody game. And rather than them sorting their differences out between the different races with warfare, they do it with like American football stroke rugby. And it's a wonderful game and it's really fun. But it's a board game, right? So you just play it on a regular board. You've got like little, almost like checkers on the board where you move your players up and down, you beat each other up, you score touchdowns. It's a brilliant game. It's really, really interesting. But the lore in it is like surface deep, right? It's literally all about just like these wacky and wonderful fantasy teams playing each other in this silly game. And most importantly, this is where I'm really perplexed with what they've done with this BattleTech Gothic. It's not a competitor to itself. You know, the rank and flank Warhammer fantasy game is you need terrain, you need armies, you need catapults, you need archers, everything else. The Blood Bowl teams, you buy like a standalone team and maybe add a bit more to it, because you can have like a roster of 16, put some proxied miniatures in there, maybe get a few star players, and then you've got a team. And then the two never do meet. So if you are interested in, you can be interested in both, one or neither. Now, the same is true of this. Like with BattleTech Gothic, you can say, okay, well, yeah, like I said, I probably will buy this just to get like the weird and wonderful mechs that are in it. But if this does hit off, right, let's just say in a universe where I don't think it will, I think this will be a standalone product that in the future we will just laugh at, to be honest. And maybe like the chap said on the comment there, maybe this is something that... you know, it's going to be used as like an in-universe parody, as like a Solaris horror event or something like that, which would be quite fun. But you know, we are like, if it does take off, what have you done? You've created a 6mm terrain game to rival BattleTech. And honestly, and I'm just being honest here in terms of my appraisal, that would really, really annoy me, right? Like, I don't want rivals to BattleTech. I want BattleTech. I want the joy that I have with the IP and everything else, and you know, I'm playing the games and talking about it on here. I don't want to talk about gnarly 40k BattleTech particularly. And I'm not going to bury it so much in regards like, oh, you know, like, oh yeah, it's all terrible and it'll be a terrible, because we don't know yet. It could be an amazing game. It could be something that I get and think, oh, you can incorporate some of this into BattleTech or whatever. So we don't have that much info yet. But just like prima facie, looking at this, I'm like, this is worrying. So let's get on to the worrying thing now. And someone actually, I think it was Daz that brought it up in the YouTube comment, on the post comments that I put out this morning. This to me, this is going now into Optic. This is like worrying in terms of BattleTech as a system and as a development IP. Like, does this show us that they've got a huge lack in confidence about the BattleTech products in general? And it's hard to argue against that, really, because out of everything that they could have done, out of all the kind of line developments that they could have done for products, you know, whether you're talking, you know, they've just done the Mercenaries box set, which is very much like, for me, it was very much like a post-Clan Invasion box set. You know, the mechs in there kind of suited that. And it kind of tidied up all the derpier mechs, like the Assassin, the Vulcan, things like that. They were all in there. But now it's like, you know, why haven't they done, like, they could have done like the Hinterlands, Tamar Rising type box set, and there are kind of gribbly mechs in that, right? If you go and like look through the Hinterlands books, there are like mechs that are like in fur almost. It's very, you know, it's interesting. Like, do that within the universe if you want to kind of take the mechs in a different direction. And I think this just really like reeks of like that they've got no confidence in the actual product that they've done. And that obviously really worries me. And I think they need to clear that up. I think they need to give some kind of... Is this just like... this is a standalone throwaway. We just want to do it as an experiment. We want to kind of... Even if they just admit, look, this is just a cash grab to see if we can kind of coin in from the Trench Crusade, you know, cynicism. And I'd be fine with that if they were honest about that. They're a business. Business has to make cynical decisions to make money. Go and watch any film in the 80s. And any film now, actually. All movies are made with like a cynical producer at the heart of it who says, oh yeah, you know, what we need in this film is more naked women, right? Like that will sell. And that's just a sad reality of life, right? That like good art is usually eclipsed by good commercial decisions. But I go back to that point. I don't really think this is a good commercial decision long term. And it does feel like a cynical cash grab. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get overly dramatic about it because there's so much going on in the world at the moment that's so horrifying. This is like the least of problems. It's a game, so let's all keep that in mind. But for BattleTech itself, yeah, I'm colour me worried a little bit at the moment. Anyway, I did want to ask you all one thing. If you've kept with it this long, you're definitely my core audience. So I'm just going to ask you a very quick question. We're coming up to 30 minutes here, so perfect timing. I over the last like several years, I have bought a ton of Warhammer stuff and obviously a ton of BattleTech stuff. And Games Workshop, so I buy like most of my Games Workshop stuff from my friendly local hobby store, as most people do, because it's cheaper and I like the interaction with the hobby stores. But quite a bit of stuff is like exclusive to Games Workshop that you've either got to get in their stores or on their online web store. For instance, like in Blood Bowl, you can buy like the special star players, but they're only available through... I don't know, they used to call this Forge World. I don't know if that's a thing anymore. And there's the Spitfire. I don't know if you can hear it. I'm not gonna change the camera around. It's too much effort. Believe me, there's a really cool Spitfire just going right overhead. So in effect, like, I've spent that much money with Games Workshop just on their core website that I usually, and this over the last several years, I must have done about 3 like marketing appraisals on there, where they'll literally send you an email about after you buy something saying, would you please be so kind as to give us some feedback on the product lines and you know, you as a customer and everything else. And usually they say things like, you know, what do you think of X or Y, or what do you buy? And they always ask the question, what other games do you buy from, or what other gaming systems, and they always list Catalyst Game Labs. They always list like GF9 or Gale Force 9. You know, I think the last one that I did, like the Conan game, I think they have Monolith. So it's a very big, extensive list, and I try to be as honest as I can because they make their marketing decisions off the back of that. What I want to know is, and I have bought things. I haven't bought anything off CGL for the last 2 years because the price of the shipping is insane at CGL. It's like $150 to the UK, but when it was reasonable and it was like $30 to $50 for a package, which is fine. I did buy a lot from them at the time over like maybe a 2-3 year period, and I never once had any kind of like marketing appraisal documentation through from them asking about what I wanted as one of their customers, and I am 100% in their like top probably 5% customer base in the amount of money that I spend and my engagement with the IP and everything else. And I just find it interesting that I've never been asked for that kind of marketing. Usually what you do is you'd hire a marketing company to do it for you, right? So a company will come in, you can do it, you can even go through things like, what do they call it? Is it Survey Chimp or Chimp Survey or something like that? Where you basically just can send out these like, e-forms and people just fill it out for you. And then you've got a vast plethora of data on what you can make strategical commercial decisions on. Most companies do stuff like that. I've never seen Catalyst do it though. And why I'm really interested from like people across the community, have you ever had anything like that? Because when I'm looking at this, like when I look at this like BattleTech Gothic experiment, I think if you'd have asked most people in BattleTech what they wanted in terms of the core fan base, nobody wanted this, right? Or I certainly didn't. Again, people might be, now that it's out there, people might be like, oh, this is cool. But I'm talking before that. I don't think people were like desperate for this. And I think it's just interesting to see, do Catalyst even ask for that kind of marketing data or intel? Because for me, they absolutely need that, because there is a space to do something gothic or something interesting, but this is just a direction that I'm just wholly confused by. And I think it's almost a decision that looks like it's been made by a small committee of people, again, cynically as a bit of a cash grab, without it. And if they do want to kind of appeal to general audiences, that is admirable, and I'm a big advocate of that, and they've got to do that to kind of grow the IP. But I don't think this is the right way to do it. I think there are much better ways to do it. A much better way to do it, frankly, would be to go get some really good IP lawyers, fix the situation around the television show, and get Disney to do the BattleTech movie, right? Because I think Disney's still technically on the rights to that. In a world where like people are desperate for old IPs to make films of, fix that, get like a Netflix series or something, or a Disney series that's really good. That will like catapult BattleTech to the moon, right? Because it's a wonderful IP with like so much depth behind it and character development. This, I'm like, again, I just cannot get my head around it. I know I'm being quite harsh there, but I'm just giving you my honest appraisal. Anyway, let's leave it there. Thoughts always welcome down below. In fact, I am more like, I never really ask for comments for any other reason than I want to hear from people, and I do want to hear from people. What do you think? What does this mean for the future of BattleTech? And do you ever get asked for marketing data from CGL, or have you ever been over like the last 5 years? Anyway, I will leave it there. I will thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.